look, everyone's got a perspective on where the world is at right now. You know, some people think that, you know, when we've never been closer to complete and utter chaos, and others think that we're on the verge of, you know, a cataclysmic, you know, evolution of consciousness. But in terms of where we are, regardless of how people perceive it, when we look at suffering in the world, why do you think people suffer? Do you think it's a perspective? Do you think it's a situation? Why do you think suffering is present still in the world?
I didn't get your question now.
Well, we have suffering.
Yes.
Some people suffer.
You're talking about suffering, you're talking about problems, you're talking about challenges.
Challenges, but it's more the perspective that people take. Because for me, I've always looked at, not always, for a long time now, since I've been on the journey of my own, you know, my own self-awareness, I've started to realize that suffering is a perspective. You know, because you can have two people in the same situation, and you can have one person that is, you know, completely grateful and feeling totally blessed and connected with whatever is happening in their world, and you can have someone right beside them experiencing the same situation and experiencing resentment and hate and blame and guilt and shame in the exact same situation. The only difference is the two people. So I'm curious to know from what you guys do at One World, why, you know, because some people say, you know, if there was a God, you know, there would be no suffering. And in my life, I believe that suffering is an important ingredient in the evolution of our consciousness, because without pain, how do we wake up? So I'm curious to know, from your perspective, or the One World perspective, is what do you think the purpose of suffering is?
I don't think, from One World perspective, there is no great purpose for suffering, because when we look at people who are suffering, they're not creating greater good for the society. But it is only people who are moved away from suffering, who are living in a beautiful space, who are living in a space of joy and happiness, creating greater joy and happiness to people around. Why suffering? Is because you've not brought attention to your inner world. For us, suffering is the continuation of the inner dialogue once the event is over, once the challenge is over. But you continue living in that state with this inner dialogue of blaming yourself, blaming the other, blaming the system. There's so much of anger, so much of hate that is being cultivated, and we don't bring attention to that inner state. And it continues, and for few people, we've been working with people for so many years, it continues for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop with a lifetime, it continues for generation, because we not only we not only give to our children the financial inheritance, but also the emotional inheritance. And we epigenetically transfer our state to our children.
Yeah, I believe that.
And it is very important that every one of us decide to live in a beautiful state, not in a suffering state, because it's important that we create a wonderful generation for the future.
But do you think suffering is important? Because for me, I look at, without suffering, why would we look for something else? You know, I think again it was Buddha who said, the greater the pain, the greater the awakening.
But awakening has to happen, right?
Yeah.
What about wallowing in suffering and living in that state of suffering, not getting out of it?
Which, as you said, some people do. But do you think suffering and pain play an important role in the awakening of an individual? You mentioned yourself that your husband had an accident, and it was through the accident that the One World was born.
Actually, we have people asking us, like, what is your greatest suffering? It was just a moment of an accident where he was able to bring attention to how suffering was continuing.
Right.
It is a matter of insight. But we don't believe in one person needing to have lived in suffering or lived a lot of life in suffering in order to experience beautiful world. Let me share with you. We as a couple it is very important for us to create a generation which can help and support and who can be compassionate and loving. I don't think Loka, my 13-year-old, has suffered a great deal.
Understood.
But she's an amazing individual.
Yeah.
An individual who can connect, an individual who can be kind, who can be loving, not in terms of values and ideals that we have dinned into her. We have never done it. We have not asked her to be this.
Yeah.
But just with the experience of love and connection that she shares with us.
She reflects the environment.
Yeah. She doesn't need to suffer to be that person.
Yeah, understood.
You don't need to make her feel that, life is other way so that you have to live this way. No. Just that way of life is like, just be kind, just be loving. It's definitely not a matter of ideals, because we don't believe in dinning in ideals in children.
Yeah.
Because it kind of creates so much of conflict within oneself, and that conflict only separates. There's no big deal about conflict.
Yeah.
It only separates you from the rest. So it is a way of life. It's a natural state where you can live in a beautiful state, and you can love, you can be kind, you can be compassionate, you can create a difference in the world.
No.
I don't think she suffered a great deal. You can ask her.
Well, I think that's a great perspective, because I think there is a lot of teachings out there, and again, I share with you what I reflect from my own experience, which is my awakenings, and I've had many, have come from numerous painful experiences. I've had 7 near-death experiences, and every time, and the stroke was the last one, and every time I have something, it wakes me up that little bit more. But to hear your perspective, especially with a child who comes into an environment that they don't need to suffer in order to experience the beautiful state, that's going to be refreshing for many people to hear. Because some people are probably in a situation right now where they haven't got pain, they haven't got suffering, but they would like to feel more connected. They would like to experience this beautiful state that you speak of. And with some people telling them that pain is the awakening, they might be searching for pain in order to wake up, and where in fact they actually don't need it in the first place.
We hear great speakers starting their life from a painful experience or a great deal of suffering that they've experienced as a child, or something that has happened in their lives. Life need not be that way. Me, Krishnaji and I, we don't believe in you need to be in suffering in order to be awakened.
That's refreshing.
Yes.
That's very refreshing. And a lot of people get a huge sigh of relief with that.
There you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Unstoppable with me, your host, Kerwin Ray. And please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you get to see all of these interviews in the flesh. Share this podcast with your friends. I would love to hear what you guys think. Thanks for joining us.